He had always believed that peace had a scent. For Victor, it smelled like damp soil in the early morning, the sharp green of cut mint, and the warmth of wood baked under sunlight. When he and Jamie moved into the old farmhouse on the outskirts of Maple Hollow, they didn't bring much, just a few boxes, a toolbox, and a quiet promise to begin again. Not because they were running from anything, but because love sometimes needs silence to be heard. Their wedding had been small, a few friends under a canopy of borrowed lights, no church bells, no family speeches, just vows, whispered like prayer, and a shared dream to grow something beautiful with their own hands. The farmhouse wasn't much, peeling paint, squeaky floors, but behind it stood a wide open yard. No fences, no rules, just raw, untamed land waiting for intention. Jamie stood in the middle of it that first afternoon, boots sinking into moss, and said almost to himself, "Let's build it here." And so they did. The greenhouse began as a sketch on a diner napkin. It became their routine reclaimed windows from a junkyard 2 towns over, sanded frames, buckets of old screws. They laid the foundation together, adjusting angles, measuring twice, never rushing. Victor painted each beam a muted shade of mint green, while Jamie planned where the rows of butter lettuce, arugula, and heirloom tomatoes would sit. Inside the frame, they hung a wind chime made of old spoons and clipped a string of warm lights across the ceiling beams. At night, it glowed softly under the stars, like a beacon built from patience. Jamie called it the Bloomhouse. He carved a sign by hand and planted it near the door. It wasn't just a place to grow vegetables. It was their testimony of hope, of return, of doing something the right way, even if no one was watching. But someone was watching. From the porch across the narrow gravel road, Mr. Keller sat in his plastic chair, still as stone. Always dressed the same button-up shirt, tucked into khakis, white hair combed back tight. He never spoke, never waved, just observed. Eyes hidden behind thick glasses, arms crossed, mouth drawn like a straight line refusing to bend. At first, Victor thought nothing of it. Maybe the man just liked his quiet. Jamie, always the more cautious one, said something felt off. Not fear, just a subtle chill, like a breeze from a window that shouldn't be open. The greenhouse grew, and so did the soil within it. They planted rows of greens, herbs, even a few sunflowers near the entrance. Every Saturday, they harvested a few leaves and cooked dinner from their little patch of earth. It tasted sweeter than anything from a store. Cleaner, earned. They didn't post about it, didn't turn it into content. It was private, precious, a life that didn't need permission. Until the morning Victor found the first signs. He had gone out early, coffee in hand, to check the irrigation lines. The mint was blackened at the tips. The basil looked melted. At the edge of the rosemary bed, hidden just behind the last row of soil, sat a half-empty plastic jug. There was no label, but the smell burned sharp and synthetic, the kind of stench that doesn't belong anywhere near something living. Victor didn't speak. He just stared. Then carefully, he lifted the container, wrapped it in an old towel, and placed it in the trunk of the car. The police station was quiet. A single officer at the desk barely looked up when Victor placed the jug on the counter. After explaining, after pointing to photos of the withered plants and the suspicious residue, the officer sighed. "Unless you caught someone pouring it, there's nothing we can do." Victor left with the jug still in his trunk. Jamie didn't ask many questions when he returned. He just saw the look in Victor's eyes, the way his shoulders fell differently, the silence between his fingers. That night, Victor sat alone inside the greenhouse. The lights were off. The air smelled of wilt and silence. He rested one palm on the soil, still damp from watering, and whispered not a vow, but a promise. If they wouldn't stop him, he would. Have you ever built something from scratch, only to watch someone try to tear it down? If you've ever been there, this story is for you. Follow us at Heart Stories, where resilience takes root. The damage spread slowly like rot beneath floorboards. At first, they thought it might be the pH levels. Jamie adjusted the compost, added crushed eggshells, checked every corner for pests. But no bug had done this. No drought, no mistake. The kale collapsed. The tomatoes blistered. The lettuce leaves curled in on themselves like they were trying to disappear. Jamie tried to stay calm, but Victor saw the way his hands trembled when he pressed the soil, saw the quiet behind his eyes. The unspoken question neither of them dared say aloud. Did someone do this? On purpose, they dug through every possibility, replaced half the beds, cleaned the irrigation lines, switched to filtered rainwater. Nothing helped. Until one afternoon, while cleaning behind the compost barrels, Jamie found a second plastic jug tucked low behind a pile of mulch. Same shape, same stench, no label. He carried it into the kitchen like it was evidence, set it on the table. Victor didn't say a word. Neither did Jamie. They just stared at it, as if waiting for it to confess. Later that night, Victor drove to the sheriff's office in the next town over. He spoke to a different officer, one who actually took notes and asked for the photographs again. But even he admitted it unless someone saw it happen, unless there were fingerprints or footage. It was just unfortunate circumstances. Victor drove home in silence. Jamie was waiting on the porch. No lights, just the faint glow of stars above the greenhouse. "I thought this place would be safe," Jamie whispered, not looking at him. "I thought if we worked hard enough, loved quietly enough, the world would leave us alone." Victor didn't answer. He didn't know how. That week, they stopped planting, not out of fear, but grief. The soil had turned sour. It smelled wrong. And no seed should be asked to grow in a place where love had been poisoned. Days passed. The greenhouse stood silent, a shell of what it had promised to be. Then came the letter. Folded neatly, left without a stamp, tucked into their mailbox like a secret no one wanted to say out loud. "You chose this lifestyle. Don't act surprised when the soil turns against you." Jamie read it twice, then tore it in half without a word. But Victor kept the pieces, slipped them into a drawer, because something inside him was shifting. Not rage, not yet, but something cold, something precise. That night, while Jamie slept, Victor sat at the kitchen table, opened his laptop, and began typing. Not a complaint, a plan. He remembered the summer markets they had visited, the neighbors who had waved, the teenager at the co-op who wore a rainbow pin and offered them fresh peaches. Not everyone here hated them. Some were just waiting for someone to speak first. So Victor wrote a proposal, a public garden day, an open harvest celebration, a chance to reclaim the space that was being stolen from them, not with anger, but with community. He titled it Maple Hollow Clean Harvest Festival, an LGBTQ plus open garden day. He printed 30 flyers, folded them carefully, and the next morning, while Jamie brewed coffee in silence, Victor walked out and began handing them to every open door. Some people smiled, some frowned. One woman told him to stay away from her property, but a few accepted the flyer with soft nods. That evening, Jamie found the remaining stack on the table. Victor looked up. "I'm tired of waiting for someone to protect us. Let's protect ourselves." Jamie didn't respond, but he picked up a flyer, read it once, and set it back down gently. The next morning, a young man on a bicycle stopped at the end of their driveway. He introduced himself as Luca, said he was 16, said he had seen the flyer. And then, without asking, he said quietly, "My parents don't let me say it, but I think I'm like you. Can I help with the festival?" Victor just nodded. Because the truth was, they hadn't just built a greenhouse. They had started something that wouldn't be so easily uprooted. The festival took shape slowly, like the way seedlings stretch before they break the surface. It started with Luca, then came the yoga instructor from the studio near the town library. She said she'd bring herbal tea and folding mats. The woman from the antique store offered to loan a few tables. Even the local baker, whose daughter had come out the year before, promised fresh bread and jam. Each person was a quiet yes, and every yes added color to something that had been growing in silence. Jamie found himself moving again, fixing the broken hinge on the greenhouse door, repainting the garden sign with brighter colors. He didn't say it out loud, but Victor noticed the way he started whistling again while watering the rosemary, the way his shoulders dropped just a little, as if a weight had shifted. For the first time since the soil went black, hope returned. But just like before, something watched. 3 days before this festival, Victor came home to find a pile of ash in the middle of the greenhouse floor. No note, no sign of forced entry, just scorched leaves and the faint metallic scent of something that should never have burned. That night, a dead bird appeared on their porch. Jamie didn't scream. He simply took the small body in his hands, buried it beneath the apple tree, and stood in silence until the wind picked up again. Victor filed another report. Another shrug from the authorities. No witnesses, no camera footage, just another unfortunate incident. But Jamie wasn't still anymore. He sent an email to someone from his past, a lawyer he hadn't spoken to in years, the one who helped him navigate his emancipation when his family cut ties. She replied within the hour. They talked on the phone for nearly 2 hours, about local codes, about rights, about zoning laws and property boundaries. She offered to pull public records and quietly file background checks. If they want to fight, Jamie told Victor afterward, then we'll make it fair and legal. Victor smiled, not because he wanted revenge, but because something in Jamie's voice had returned. Steady, clear. The next morning, the town clerk received a notarized proposal outlining the exact dimensions of the event space. Victor included maps, electrical needs, and estimated crowd size. He made copies of every form and slipped them into a labeled folder. If anyone tried to stop the festival, they'd have to go through the system that had failed to stop the poison. By then, the Bloomhouse no longer looked empty. The beds had been cleared of rot. New soil had been delivered. Painted signs hung from reclaimed planks. There were strings of paper lanterns folded by Luca and his friends, and a chalkboard that read in big block letters, "Everything good starts with dirt." Victor stayed up late, stringing lights along the hedge. Jamie worked beside him, repainting the table where they'd serve lemonade and mint cookies. And across the street, behind the blinds of a dimly lit window, Mr. Keller watched. 2 days before the festival, an envelope appeared in their mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No signature. If you invite the wrong people here, you'll destroy what's left of this town. Victor placed it beside the other notes. Jamie took a deep breath and whispered, "Let them come. Let them see." The night before the event, clouds gathered but held their rain. Victor walked the garden path one last time, checking lights, securing the speaker cords. Luca stayed late to help, humming a melody he said he wrote just for the occasion. Before bed, Jamie stood by the greenhouse door and touched the frame they'd once built, and with trembling hands and hope too fragile to name. "We built this from nothing," he said. And Victor has answered, "That's exactly why they're afraid of it." What grew in that garden wasn't just vegetables, it was defiance. It was beauty. And when the sun rose the next day, it would be theirs, no matter who tried to claim otherwise. The morning of the festival arrived with still air and low clouds. By 9, cars lined the gravel road like beads on a string. People brought folding chairs, jars of pickles, homemade signs that said things like "Grow Love" and "Pride Takes Root." Children ran up and down the chalk sidewalks, dragging ribbons behind them like kites. Luca wore a bright blue shirt and carried a stack of flyers he'd designed himself, each one decorated with hand-drawn herbs and a simple message: "This garden is for everyone." The greenhouse glowed under strands of colored lights. Fresh soil filled every bed. Potted lavender lined the walkway. And inside, Jamie stood behind a long table, pouring mint lemonade into compostable cups with quiet concentration. Victor watched him, grateful and alert. At 11:14, Mr. Keller appeared. He wore a pressed shirt and carried a clipboard like a weapon. His jaw was clenched so tightly that the cords in his neck looked like wires ready to snap. He stopped at the edge of the property, didn't look at the plants, didn't glance at the children laughing in the herb maze. Just pointed toward the greenhouse and said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "This is a violation of Code 4.17. Unauthorized event structures within 10 feet of a boundary line must be cleared within 72 hours. The music quieted. A few heads turned. Victor stepped forward, calm, measured. But before he could speak, someone else did. "I'm with zoning," said a woman near the lemonade table. It was the yoga teacher from the library district. "Everything here has been approved. I stamped the permit myself." Keller looked at her, confused, then angry, but more voices followed. "I live across the street," said a mother holding her daughter's hand. "You filed a complaint when we painted our shutters yellow. You told my son he couldn't sell lemonade because it attracted the wrong kind of people," added an elderly man from the antique store. "You called the police when I put a pride flag in my window," said Luca, quietly but clearly. Each voice landed like a pebble in a pond, small, but echoing. Keller's shoulders stiffened. He raised the clipboard again. "You people," but he didn't finish, because Jamie, standing beside Victor now, placed a small potted mint plant in front of him and said, "Without anger, you poisoned our soil. We rebuilt it. You threatened our peace. We created a space for healing. You don't have to like it, but you can't stop it." Keller didn't take the plant. He didn't speak again. He walked backward, clipboard trembling slightly, turned, and disappeared down the road. The music resumed. It wasn't a celebration. Not yet. It was something deeper. A release, though. Later that afternoon, while Victor was helping Luca set up for the closing circle, a woman approached. Gray hair, pressed dress, hands folded in front. "My name is Eleanor Marlins," she said. "I'm Mr. Keller's sister." Victor tensed. She looked around, saw the children, the string lights, the chalk drawings. "I came to warn you," she said. "He never healed. Not from who he was, not from who he was forced to become." She handed Victor a small envelope. "He won't say it, but once, when he loved a man, and the garden you built looks exactly like the one they used to tend before his father found out." She didn't stay, just nodded once and left. Victor held the envelope in both hands, felt the weight of a story too long buried. That evening, Jamie played piano as people packed up. The last of the cookies disappeared. The sun dipped below the roofline, and for the first time in months, the greenhouse smelled only of earth, light, and something else, something new. The envelope remained unopened for 2 days. Victor placed it on the kitchen windowsill where the morning light could reach it, as if whatever it held might soften with time. Jamie didn't ask about it. He simply worked in the garden like he always had, his hands moving through soil and rosemary stems with quiet attention. On the third morning, Victor broke the seal. Inside was a black and white photograph, faded, curled at the corners. 2 men standing beside a trellis wrapped in ivy. One wore a military uniform, the other an apron with smudges of dirt across the chest. They weren't touching, but their bodies leaned toward each other the way sunflowers tilt toward light. On the back, in narrow handwriting, his name was Thomas. He called it our haven. I never got to say goodbye. No signature, just that. Victor showed it to Jamie without a word. Jamie took a long breath and said quietly, "Maybe this was never about us. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was about something long buried, clawing its way back through layers of shame and regret. About a man who once built a garden he had to destroy, and then spent the rest of his life trying to erase the memory of what it meant to him." They framed the photo and hung it inside the greenhouse, just above the potting table. Luca saw it first. He asked who they were. Victor just said, "People who tried to grow something the world didn't know how to care for." Weeks passed, then months. The Bloomhouse became more than a greenhouse. It became a gathering place, a classroom, a canvas. Kids painted stones and tucked them along the garden paths with words like hope, Home. Yours. Neighbors who had once walked past without eye contact now brought seeds, cuttings, stories. One Saturday, the baker's teenage daughter played cello in the corner while Jamie taught a composting class. Another weekend, the widow from the edge of town baked lavender shortbread and sat with Luca while he read aloud from a book of queer poetry. The soil, once ruined, now grew things faster than they could harvest. The mint was wild, the tomatoes sweet, the rosemary no longer smelled of ash, and the photo remained, unmoved, as if it belonged there all along. Victor often thought about Keller. He had moved 2 towns away. No word, no return, but sometimes, when the breeze hit a certain way, when the greenhouse creaked in the early evening light, Victor imagined a man sitting in silence in a new place, holding nothing but an old photo and the ache of what could have been. That's what shame does. It rots what we don't tend to. But love, even when damaged, always leaves seeds. And when those seeds find the right hands, the right place, the right courage, they bloom again. Jamie once said, "Gardens don't forget." Neither do people, and Victor now believed it was true. Not because of the plants, but because of the way people showed up, kept showing up. Because even when you poison the soil, someone will always return to plant again. Have you ever built something that helped others heal? Even when you were still healing yourself, we'd love to hear your story below. And if you believe in growing spaces of love, resilience, and second chances to stick with hard stories, there's more to bloom.